I feel like not a lot of artists typically appreciate armor design, which is fine. Armor is kind of difficult to draw. There's a lot of bits, it's very shiny, and it's difficult to make pretty because when you're designing a character, you want them to look nice. But armor, it's all covering, it has to be very functional, therefore, it's going to look kind of boring and it's gonna suck. But I feel like the Fire Emblem franchise does a pretty neat job at designing armor that is relatively practical while also being very uniquely Fire Emblem aesthetically. Like, you're going to look at a character wearing a certain type of armor and think, yeah, that is a Fire Emblem character. At least if you're pretty familiar with the series, the franchise, because you're not going to recognize a Fire Emblem character if you've never seen what one looks like. Anyway, all this to say, Fire Emblem succeeds at making armor that looks aesthetically pleasing while mostly being functional. Here's the thing, sometimes they don't do that. It's fine. The aesthetic choices that they make that are specifically unpractical are still recognizably Fire Emblem. So even if it doesn't make sense to have a character wear something a certain way, you're still going to recognize it as a Fire Emblem armor. And that's kind of the thing with character design. Sometimes you make sacrifices to communicate certain things. In this case, they wanted to make characters look appealing and pretty and recognizable. So no helmets. But I am a bit of a stickler with how I go about armor design, where I really do prioritize the functionality and the protective nature of whatever they're wearing, or just like the general how comfortable it is, because sometimes, man, it can look uncomfortable. But I wanted to do this because I think that the Fire Emblem franchise is really cool in having like unique armor design, and it influenced me a lot as an artist. That's why I enjoy armor design. That's why I like this type of fantasy so much. So this is just me trying to show my kind of appreciation of trying to do things my way. I'm going to say already in advance, I do not care about redesigning Carmilla or Tharja or any of the dancers. I don't care. Carmilla and Tharja are meant to be fan servicey characters. They made decisions to make them fulfill that fan service, and it works for them, and that's cool. For the dancers, they aren't meant to be fighters, and I don't want to put them in big fat armor or protective clothes. They're supposed to be a little fan servicey. Like, would they easily perish being actually put in a battlefield wearing what they wear? Yeah, but that's not my main concern. So I'm going to be redesigning 3 characters today because they are characters where I feel like the design aesthetic took over their armor's practicality, and these are for characters who don't have the same sort of exceptions that Carmilla and Tharja have, wherein that they are supposed to be fan servicey. So yeah, starting off with Cordelia. She's a Pegasus Knight from Fire Emblem Awakening. She's said to be a prodigy at everything she does, besides running, which led her to become a Pegasus Knight. Despite that, she has pretty low self-esteem and is ill-tempered. Design-wise, she's wearing a uniform, seeing as she matches Sumiya, another Pegasus Knight. Pegasus Knights across all games tend to follow the same design patterns, which is cool. The things that make her recognizable as a Fire Emblem character, in my opinion, are the boots with flaps held up by garters, the stylization of the armor and accessories, and the length of her dress. She has small wings in her hair, which Sumiya also has, that allude to her winged mount. She only wears plate armor on her arms and torso. Having light armor gives her greater mobility on a flying mount. I feel like her design is meant to be cute more than functional. I like that it's consistent as a uniform compared to other Pegasus Knights like Sumiya, but the dress, boots, and belt feel like pure fashion. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Fashion choices can help differentiate your allies from your enemies. That being said, there are some things that feel impractical, like the chest plate forming a point down the stomach, making bending forward uncomfortable. While most of the legs are covered, there's still an open bit of the thigh that would probably chafe against the saddle, which would make riding for hours during a fight pretty irritating on the skin. Here's how I tweaked the design with all that in mind. The first thing I did was basically cover up any skin that wasn't her face. Arguably, I should have gone ahead and given her a helmet, but that gives me a chance to play with her hair. I decided to put it in a messy bun for 2 reasons. She's flying on a horse, While long flowing hair is majestic, it probably wouldn't fare well in battle. I didn't want to cut her hair though, because I think Cordelia would care a great deal about her femininity. As I established in the beginning, she has a low self-esteem. We can also learn on a beach-themed mission that she wears a larger breastplate to make her chest seem bigger than it is. It comes off as really reductive, especially because of the way you find that out, but I think you can do something really genuine with this, which is why I tried to keep those elements in her design. From the bits that I have read on her wiki, her femininity doesn't seem to have a major influence on her self-esteem, more so than it is an expression of her lack of confidence. But I think narratively, it'd be very easy to tie those two things together. Picture this. Cordelia is a prodigy. Because she's expected to do everything perfectly, she's a perfectionist. To keep up that effortlessly talented facade, she works day and night to develop her skills. From the stress, she ends up developing a short temper, and she's really dismissive of praise. As a result, people accuse her of being unladylike. It seems like a stereotypical narrative, but I feel like it could reflect, at least in part, a very real thing feminine people face. The moment they break away from the high femme, delicate, and demure mold, they are masculinized. While characters who are confident in their femininity, regardless of how others perceive them, is important, I think it's also worth showing characters who do struggle with this, and that confidence is something that is built over time, rather than something you have inherently. Okay, that's a lot of rambling. Back onto the design. I gave her a boob plate, but removed the stabby bit. I made the shoulder pad smaller and rounder so as to not accentuate her shoulders. I made the belt smaller and tied around the waist to simultaneously free up hip movement, as well as to accentuate the hourglass figure. I also shortened the boots down to knee length to mirror riding boots as seen on real-life jockeys. Next, we have Charlotte, a fighter from Fire Emblem Fates, masking as cordial and subdued, but on the battlefield, she lets loose, becoming a ferocious brute. She's wearing a battle bikini. To be fair, fighters in Fates tend to have very revealing clothes, trying to fill in the barbarian archetype, but there's a difference in the way it applies to men versus women. In the one example I found of a guy in the same game with the same class, his legs and upper chest are exposed. He has a sort of corset thing going on, which probably severely limits his range of motion, but at least his guts are protected. This is not the same. I don't care how strong she is, supposedly a stray arrow could kill her. Also, it really doesn't help that she's supposed to look prim and proper with her light blue and white. I get what they're trying to do here. They're contrasting the way she wants to be perceived via her color palette with the way that she actually is via her class. But it doesn't work because of the sexualization. I feel like it is extremely distracting from the point. That being said, here's how I'd apply the same concept while keeping it functional. The thing about Charlotte is that she doesn't want people to realize how brutal she is. Why would she deliberately dress like a barbarian archetype? Instead, I wanted to visualize that contrast another way: cute fashion. Going to battle in a cutesy dress made with everyday light fabric isn't that much more protective than a bikini, but think of all the secrets you can hide under that dress. A gambizin, chainmail, plating, pockets, and an absolutely shredded bod. I still decided to give her cleavage and some visible upper thighs. That being said, I still decided to give her some visible upper thighs. I also tried to make the armor look pretty bulky and imposing compared to the dress. The big belt is supposed to be reminiscent of those heavyweight champion belts. The rest is just stuff I got from the other Fire Emblem art. Another thing, Charlotte is Norian, and while there are some exceptions, Norian characters typically have very dark color palettes. So to add further contrast, I made all the armor pieces dark, while the dress she wears keeps the light color she had going on before. I also kept her hair the same to shorten it slightly. I thought of doing some form of updo, but I felt like it'd look too similar to my Cordelia redesign. Plus, I feel like it just makes sense for her. While she's polite, I don't want her to appear too put together. She's not really looking for respect. She could probably beat it out of anyone she wants. She wants to be treated nicely, or the way people would typically treat cute girls. The free wavy hair done half up with a bow is a really cutesy girly hairstyle that isn't overly formal like an intricate updo. Also, imagine her beating the heck out of an entire army while her hair goes wild. Let's be clear, the moral of the story isn't sexy woman bad. I saw in her wiki that part of her tactics to receive care and attention would be flirting with men. I read a lot of her support conversations. Typically she tends to act really sweet and is a little coy. The skimpy outfit is supposed to complement that, but I feel like it's more distracting. You don't see all of those ideas at play, and even when you come to understand her character, the design still feels like it lacks depth. Lastly, we have Kellum, also from Awakening. He's an overall kind of average guy, nothing really notable about him, besides maybe his stature. He's so unnoticeable to the point where people actually rarely acknowledge he's around and often get scared whenever he pops up. While he's used to this, he would like to be noticed more often. Kellum, I assume, is supposed to look like a big rock. He's a big tank, and half the time you forget he's there. His design is kind of boring, which is fair since his whole deal is that you can easily miss him. The one thing keeping him from being entirely forgettable is his armor, since it's consistent with the design aesthetics of Fire Emblem Awakening. I'm not bothered by the sculpted muscles on the chestplate, seeing how that stuff you can see in old historical armor, and it gives you an impression of how whatever army he serves sees their soldiers. The only reason I put him here is that he can't move. You may not be able to dent his armor, but the moment you knock him over, he's done. What's he gonna do, get up? He can't use his core muscles or bend his legs at the hip. Plus, seeing how top-heavy he is, knocking him over is probably really easy. At the end of the day, none of that really matters because he's not wearing a helmet. So my goal is to keep him bulky and unnoticeable while giving him a bit more mobility. In theory, the dome design is really cool. It's a unique silhouette and makes the wearer look like a literal tank. But there's a reason why you never see this anywhere else. You can't move or see anything in this thing. I tried my best to keep the top as large as possible without sacrificing too much mobility, and moved the dome bit down to the hip. I kept the sculpted muscle details because I feel like it's a fun bit of world building. The sculpted chest plates have existed historically, and there are other instances where design choices were made purely for aesthetic reasons. Take the cod piece. While you could speculate on its functionality, cod pieces were an important piece of fashion from the 15th to 16th century and made their way onto armor. Besides trying to give Kellum more points of articulation, I also gave him a helmet. I didn't give the other two helmets, and generally fantasy characters rarely wear one, certainly not one that would obscure the face. That being said, I think it works for him. Firstly, it's not like he has much going on there right now. He's meant to look kind of forgettable. Instead of giving him an incredibly boring hairstyle and face, just slap a helmet on there. It adds a little air of mystery, and if you're worried about a helmet reducing his relatability/appeal, please Google Gatekeeper Fire Emblem Three Houses and look at all the fan art there is for a guy you can't even recruit. Alright, that's all my thoughts and redesigns. Hope you liked them. If you didn't, I hope this inspired something in you. I'm taking a break from commissions, so in the meantime, please donate to Ukrainians or trans kids in Texas. Okay, thank you, bye!